You know, part of the problem has been the macho, male, go for it, very aggressive, I'm in it, I'm here for my bonus at the end of the year. You know, that is the culture that's got to change. And you're absolutely right. There are thousands and thousands of people, decent people, working hard in banking in this city. It is important we remain the banking capital, the financial capital of the world with a decent banking system.
Do you go for this?
I can't say I entirely share Tessa's optimism about women being the icons and paragons of integrity and competence. I'm just thinking of, and we may come to it later on in the show, the Care Quality Commission, headed by women. I mean, it's not exactly a great advertisement. I don't think it's the case that either men or women are more susceptible to corruption or fraud or incompetence or malice or recklessness. I think we're all frail. We all need to have systems of regulation put in place, and we all need to be in a society which has a shared culture of integrity and trust and honesty, and that's what we've all lost.
OK. Let's, we'll go on to another point. We've got lots of questions, including possibly one on the NHS, which you mentioned. Just to say, you can, of course, join in tonight's debate by text or on Twitter. Our hashtag BBCQT. You can follow us at BBC Question Time. Text comments to 83981. Press the red button to see what others are saying. Russell Brand, I think you have 6.5 million followers. I don't think Question Time has quite that, but anyway, it's building up.
We can unify our followers if we are allowed to establish a single agenda. Particularly on this banking issue, in there in the glasses, your point was best. I reckon a different kind of regulation. Say the banks was, I heard this off of, well, I've worked out from what you said, nationalise them banks, because then, you know how we have to bail them out when they lose all the money.
They are national.
Keep them, though, properly. Don't flog Lloyd's back, as George Osborne was saying yesterday, at a cheap price to his mates. So I think let's keep them banks for us so that we will reap the benefits as well as paying the deficit. So your idea was good.
We'll go on to another question. Peter Lineen, please.
Are UK drug laws working?
Are UK drug laws working? Well, last month the Home Office has been off to 10 different nations to study drug policy, and there have been various proposals made for liberalising the laws. Melanie Phillips, do you think that drug laws are working in this country? Should they be altered?
According to the statistics that I read, fewer people now are taking drugs. Drug use is going down. So from that point of view, drug laws are working. I think that they are working, insofar as they are working, it's against background of a movement to stop them working at all. This idea that, you know, it's not the drugs that are the problem, it's the laws that are the problem, that we've had a failed war on drugs. And I don't see it that way myself. I see in the last few years, or several years in fact, a policy which has been to have a move away from law enforcement into what's called harm reduction. And what harm reduction means is that you don't try as a society to stop people using drugs on the basis that all illegal drug use is harmful to the person and to society. You don't try and stop that. Harm reduction means you accept that it's going to happen and you try and mitigate the harm. And in my view, that kind of gives a green light to people to take drugs, and more people get hooked onto taking drugs. When I say law enforcement, what I'm thinking of is what they have in, say, Sweden, where they have their own problems. But nevertheless, what they do is they have a kind of zero tolerance of drugs, which means not that every drug user gets locked up, but every drug user is regarded as a problem, not as some kind of attention. He or she may be sent to prison, but not that often, especially if they're not dealing. But what they are made to do, have some sort of attention which helps them kick the habit, which helps them into treatment, which doesn't help them into treatment, it makes them have whatever is considered a...
So you're not in favour of criminalising in the sense that anyone found with drugs should be sent to jail or banged up. You think that there are other ways of dealing with it?
Those are two different questions.
All right.
You can criminalise something by making the possession or use of something illegal, but it doesn't mean that you have to lock them up. That, in my view, may be appropriate in some circumstances, but not in others.
OK. Russell Brand.
Well, mate, I don't think drug laws are working because people take drugs all the time. People take drugs because of social, psychological and emotional reasons. You're a lot of young, aren't you, in that little bit? You're the young paddock. You're the people most likely... Well, who knows? You might not be the most vulnerable to addiction. For me, it's not about the drug laws. It's about treating people with addiction issues in a compassionate and empathetic way. The opposite, actually, of what Melanie was saying, who, on a personal level, is really lovely. I've already worked out because I was chatting to her. But on that issue, I disagree with her wholeheartedly, you see, because I'm a recovering drug addict myself. When I was using drugs, I don't care if drugs are illegal. If I need drugs because I'm in pain inside, I'm taking drugs. And I know this to be true across drug addicts all over our country. If you criminalise them and marginalise them, you place an industry in the hands of criminals and you make it difficult and shaming for them to get treatment. That's the wrong way to handle the situation. We have to reach out to people compassionately, then we have a chance of achieving a solution.
And
so the laws are wrong in a way.
Would you like decriminalisation of all drugs?
Mate, Mr. Sir David, I don't like
Just David will do.
David, I don't like to get drawn on that because I'm dealing with this in a very direct way. People that are suffering from drug problems don't care about the law. They care about getting the correct treatment, which I believe is abstinence-based treatment.
Okay. The man in the second row. Yes.
Is it not sometimes necessary to criminalise these people to show who take the drugs, to show other like the young people at college I'm with at the moment, that that's not the road to go, and that in fact is another path of education and working towards a better future?
But Boris Johnson, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think your drugs policy should be dictated by what you're trying to achieve, and we're trying to reduce drug use overall, and we're trying to fight crime. We're trying to reduce crime. That's the two most important things. And listening to what Melanie had to say, I'm a huge admirer of Melanie, as you know, generally, but I think there was a contradiction, because you began by saying rightly that drug use now in this country is at an all-time low. And I think that is partly because we are pursuing sensible rehabilitation policies, looking at the problems of the users, really trying to deal with their struggle with addiction, and so on and so forth. That is the right way to do it. You've simultaneously got to have quite a tough law and order response, and that is working too. And crime is well down in London over the last few years. It's down just by 6% in the last year alone, and drugs-related crime is down. So in that context, I would myself be pretty reluctant to change the law in order to make drugs more readily available. I think we've got the balance about right, and when I look at other cities, which I don't need to name to you, where they do have a culture...
You better not. You've got bad previous on that, man.
It's all right. I don't mind being sent to apologise to the people of Amsterdam or wherever it is. When I look at what goes on there, where they do have areas where they've had an experiment, I'm not convinced that the quality of life, the kind of stuff that's associated with that area is the kind of thing we want to see in London. So I'm pretty fixed on the way things are.
The woman there, and then I come to you up there, so yes.
Aren't we sending a conflicting message to people by having some drugs as illegal and other drugs such as alcohol or nicotine as being legal?
And Davey.
Well, I think that question actually shows we need to be evidence-led. We need to look at the evidence. I think there is some evidence that drug policy is working on the rehabilitation side. As Russell said, if we can treat people with humanity when they've got an addiction and try to help them get off that addiction, that can make a real difference to that person's life and the wider society. But I'm not convinced yet we've won the war on drugs by any means. There are still thousands of people dying from drugs. They scar communities. There are drug barons who are making billions from this. I think we do need to review the drug laws. I think we need to look at the evidence. Nick Clegg's asked our ministerial colleague Jeremy Brown to look at the experience in Portugal, in Amsterdam, in the United States, in parts of the States, the United States, in the Czech Republic and other places where they've changed some of the laws, and let's look at the evidence. If changing the law leads to a positive effect for society, then we should consider that.
Can you clarify what changing the law means in your mind?
Well,
abandoning the illegality of certain drugs. I mean, making cannabis legal, for instance. Is that what you're talking about?
There is a debate debate about whether we should decriminalise the use of cannabis. I've never yet been convinced by that, no. But what I am determined that we should do is review the laws from the evidence, because I think there's been a lack of policy based on evidence in this area, and that's what we should do.
But you've had evidence in Holland, haven't you?
Well,
that Boris was referring to, the Russell Brand mentioned.
There's been some quite new changes, and it's actually rather more complicated than just following one particular country. There actually are a number of places around the world, in certain states in the US, in Portugal, in the Czech Republic, in Amsterdam, where they've made some changes. We need to learn from that. It might mean that as a result of that, we don't make any changes, but surely we should be based on evidence.
But you're encouraging people to think you would, aren't you, by the very fact you're saying it? It's not a closed book. Boris says he's against change, Melanie's against change. You're saying, let's look at how it works and maybe we will change.
I think something as important as this, we're already spending £500 million a year, rightly in my view, on rehabilitation. We're doing that. We're spending lots more, billions more, on dealing with the crimes. Now, and a lot of money is going to these wicked, organised criminals. So I am wanting to make sure we're more effective. And if, as a result of the review of the laws, we got a better policy, surely that's the right way to go.
OK. The woman there in the black dress or dark dress, yes.
From what I understand, the budgets for the treatment centres have all gone down in the last few years, so I don't think that it's much of a sign of commitment to the treatments that people have been referring to.
We're actually seeing more people under rehab.
Tessa, Jowell.
Well, I was taken by the question about the inconsistency between alcohol and tobacco and drugs. And I remember when I was Public Health Minister many years ago now, and we were very concerned to reduce smoking and the harm caused by smoking, the fact that if you're poor, you're more likely to die from smoking-related diseases. And the Chief Medical Officer at the time observed that if tobacco was being introduced today, it would be classed as an illegal drug because there is no safe level at which you can smoke. But to take that, I thought that actually, I mean, I agree with the balance in Boris's answer, a combination of legislation which is properly enforced, but the point about treatment and help for people who either don't want to form a habit or who want to kick the habit is absolutely vital. And I think that for me, what affects me most about this is the fact my constituency of Dulwich and West Norwood is about 3 miles down the road, and I see week in, week out the effect on young people of gang violence, gang intimidation by people who have made enormous amounts of money and destroy the lives of young people, and they are the drug barons. And I would be absolutely horrified if we did anything at all that made life easier or more profitable for them.
You say so, it's not working.
I agree with you. We've got to make sure these criminals are brought to book and aren't making billions of pounds out of vulnerable people. The question is, what is the best drugs policy? Now, I think we've made some improvements over the years, particularly on rehab, as I've said. But if there is evidence from abroad that we can learn from to test whether we make changes, surely you'd want to do that. I'm open-minded about this. It looks like I'm prepared to go with the evidence. And my question to others is, why won't you go with the evidence?
I've got to say, mate, it's good that you want to look at the evidence and everything, because as a person that knows a bit about addiction, being a drug addict and everything, is that it's from the dark ages the way we're treating people with addiction. There's no one, we're like a couple of miles from Shoreditch, where the streets are alive, awash with people that are suffering from this disease. No one wants to be a homeless drug addict. The treatment's got to be available to them. People do want to get clean, and the more we stigmatise them, the more we alienate them, the less likely it is that they're going to get help.
Another question. William Simmons, please. William Simmons.